Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 4 of Weighing In, the League of Legends esports talk show. Boy, oh boy, another massive episode for you. I'm your host, Josh, and I'm joined by my constant co-host, Ollie. What have you been up to for the last week?
I've been doing loads of things, Josh. I've been playing, not League. I've been playing a different game with the
League, a
word League in
different
it.
league, yeah.
Yeah. Um, I've been watching League, although grant I haven't had a lot of time, but I've tried to make sure I can watch as many games as I've been able to. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much it, to be honest. Other than obviously doing work and stuff. How about you?
Yeah, I've been doing some work, watching a lot of the league, trying to catch as much as I can. But you know how it goes; these things come thick and fast. Somehow, it is really difficult at this point to keep up. But now that we're heading into regular season for all of the major regions, we're losing the best of threes and the best of fives from North America. But that does mean we're going to see less games that are important and impactful. So, at least from a standings point, it's a little bit easier for us to kind of keep our grasp on.
Absolutely, and we still have best of threes, luckily, from the LCK that we get to watch instead
Mm.
of those best of ones from the other regions.
Yeah, definitely. And it's good to see how the best of three meta will be developing alongside what's really strong in the best of ones.
Absolutely.
So we're going to be talking about the LCS Lock-In finals and the semi-finals for that matter. Although we're mainly just going to talk about the finals because it's going to be a slightly shorter episode than normal. We'll be giving our reactions to week 2 of the LEC where G2 lost their first game this year. And then we'll also be giving you our reaction to week 3, I believe, of the LCK and matches to watch in all 3 regions as we head into three weeks of regular season play. And we actually have the LCS schedule finally for next week in 2 days' time. Which I was slightly worried we weren't going to have any matches to recommend, but thank God, good old Rito managed to tell us what teams we're going to be playing 2 days, before the regular season.
Yes,
That's
so
some great planning. But first, before we get
sorry.
on to the week 1, let's talk about the finals for the LCS Lock-In. In the semi-finals, which also this week, we saw Cloud9 narrowly take out 100 Thieves in what was a really exciting reverse sweep. Any comments from that game?
Oh, I mean, to be honest, I thought it was a really good series, and I don't have too many comments other than Cloud9 looked really strong in pretty much all of their wins. Definitely, they looked really strong,
Mm.
and even in the games that they lost, they looked like they maybe were a little bit underconfident, but they still looked like they had their good basics down, etc. Like good map rotations, and everything kind of looked like they were getting their heads into it, and then finally they came back and won the series. But to me, I didn't really, even after they lost those games, I wasn't really thinking, okay, this is going to be a quick sweep for. I mean, they're not going to. I wasn't thinking they're going to get sweeped here. I kind of still had faith in them, because they look now like a relatively well-oiled machine.
It's very interesting. Do you know what? After that first 2 games, I really did think that they were going to get swept simply because of how proficiently 100 Thieves were playing. The way that they were able to play around the mid jungle and the jungle top synergy, really snowballing those players, and with how poorly Sven played in the first 2 matches of that best of 5, it really felt like 100 Thieves were just winning every lane and winning the game because of that. But once we saw some more traditional picks coming out of some of the members of Cloud9, we saw Sven go back to the center and then onto the MF. It seemed like that bot lane just opened up a little bit more and it returned them to their winning ways.
Yeah, I agree, and I think something that is like really um, key to like keeping your mind is when you're watching a series like this, if those if the team does the same thing, for example, in game one and game two, you can kind of realize, okay, they're going to probably try this strat game for game three, so they're going to work around that mid jungle duo. So we can try and counter that by, like you said, putting more pressure into the bot lane, etc.
Mm.
And kind of working around 100 Thieves' strengths.
Yeah, and I really do think that Sven was the standout for me from Cloud9 in this game. Getting 10, 11, 12 kills on the MFs in the last game. And just working really well with Perks being able to roam on the TF. Now, granted, if you're not roaming on TF, what are you doing the whole game?
Mm.
But, at least that almost is a crutch, I think, for a team that hasn't necessarily played together as much as some of the other teams. If you put Perks on a champion that has to roam, it almost makes it easier for him to do that and be a part of the team players.
Yeah, exactly. And Perks is really good at kind of. I mean, we've always known he has great map awareness, etc. So putting him on something like the Twisted Fate, where you have these global ultimates, is really useful, and he's able to capitalize on that amazingly. And we've seen people not do well on Twisted Fate. Like, it's not just if you pick TF you're
Mm.
gonna win side lanes. It's you have to know when to use it effectively, and you have to be able to kind of have dominance in your lane first off to be able to um, get those ultimates off and be effective. Because if you say are losing your lane and you like ult down bot, for example, you might just lose that 2v3 if you're not strong enough to win that, and then say their jungler comes in and you lose that. But I think Perks was able to capitalize on it really, really well.
I agree. The one worrying thing for me in that best of five, and which actually reared its head as well in their finals performance, was how relatively weak Fudge looked. And now we obviously have to say this. He has been playing some of the best top laners in North America, going up against Sunday and then Alfari, but he really got shown up in all of these games.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, and I think it just comes down to experience, and we know Fudge isn't the most experienced player.
Mm,
When you're coming against players like Sunday, for example, like he did in that semi-finals, it's going to be really tough to get a lead in your lane. But something which he can do is just play a bit more passive,
yeah.
which is probably a better kind of playstyle for him, and it will work better with the team. And I think that's something he'll probably notice going forwards.
I think so, and we did see that in the finals game from him. The other semi final, though, before we touch on the finals, Team Liquid, a pretty convincing stomp overall against Evil Genius's 30-minute game and then two 25-minute games. Core JJ has to be a massive standout from that stomp.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think Core JJ is just showing us why he's the best support in North America at the moment. And I think he just kind of took the team on his back and said, and this is something which he doesn't really do that often. Like, I mean, at least last season he wasn't really the hyper carry of this team, but
Mm.
this series he really stepped up, and yeah, they absolutely stomped Evil Geniuses in a 3-0. I don't think any of these games were really close. I didn't see EG having a chance to get back into these games whatsoever.
Yeah, not at all. And I really want to see him on more of those hard engaged champions. He played two games of Thresh where he was really good, landing hook after hook after hook. But the game that stood out for me was the third game on the Rel, just being able to jump in and really kind of say to Team Liquid, who have normally been quite a passive team, this is our opportunity. This is when we're going in. Everyone follow me, grouping them up, and at least Team Liquid, maybe not individually being able to see aggressive opportunities, but if you can put Core JJ on an aggressive engaged champion, all they have to do is trust his opinion, and then they go for it, right?
Yeah, I agree, and I think this is something lots of teams really lack, is someone who can have that ability to notice, say, if a team's in a bad spot and they can just go for it immediately. There's something Core JJ does really well, and that paired with having those engaged supports, like you mentioned, works amazingly.
Mm. Yeah, I do think, and it's great to see, and that it's great to see that bot lane start to level up as well in the laning phase, as well as out of the lane. I think we're going to see great things from tactical in the future, and this kind of set up the scenario where we had possibly the two best teams that everyone had predicted coming into the finals in Cloud9 and Team Liquid, and it was a surprisingly close series. We had Team Liquid taking games 1 and 2, Cloud9 coming back for some really interesting games 3 and 4, and it was a little bit of a stomp in the final 5th game, unfortunately. What was your overall impression of Cloud9 from the finals?
I thought they had a really rough start in games 1 and 2, but I didn't think they were massive stomps, to be honest. So it looked like there were maybe just some issues of, and honestly, I didn't think Team Liquid in games 1 and 2 looked like a hugely better team. I
Mm.
just thought Cloud9 they fell behind, and once you fall behind, especially against a team like Team Liquid, it's really hard to get back into the game
Yeah,
because they're going to capitalize on any little lead that they get, and they're going to just snowball games.
and
We've seen them do it time and time again. But honestly, bouncing back and winning games 3 and 4, they looked really impressive, and I thought the whole team played well. For me, it wasn't one super standout individual. Um, I mean, you can argue that certain players carried, but I think um, in especially in like I mean an almost reverse sweep,
mm,
it's like a whole team effort. But and to me, honestly, I thought going into Game 5, I thought Cloud9 had a really nice draft,
yeah.
and I honestly thought it was going to be it. They were going to get the reverse sweep, but no, Team Liquid managed to pick up that Game 5 and, like you said, a pretty convincing stomp.
Yeah, definitely. I felt like they really had the momentum, and I love these team comps coming out of Cloud9. And I think it's really interesting when we talk about the comps that they had so much faith in Fudge. They gave him, Camille and Aurelia twice. Yes, they put him on the more supportive pick of the Malphite when they were managed to pick up their first win. And I really liked his Malphite, don't get me wrong. But, going into Game 5 and picking Fudge, Aurelia into Alfari, at least it shows the team really believe in him, right?
Yeah, and honestly, I was really surprised. I'm not gonna lie. After seeing how well Alfari was performing, not just in this series, which he did absolutely stomp
Mm.
that lane in games 1 and 2, but just throughout this whole tournament, he has looked so strong. Yeah, and I was honestly really surprised that they had the confidence in Fudge to pick up those more aggressive champions against someone who is as proclaimed as Alfari.
Yeah, I mean, Alfari has been a monster all Lock-In long, and he did that again this best of 5. He really did. Even though Fudge got the counter pick into him. Alfari's gangplank, you might not want to leave that open. That's what I'll say.
Absolutely not. Jesus
Man, it was
Christ.
a monster. Even in Game 3, which Team Liquid lost, Alfari was on the gangplank and looked pretty fucking monstrous. It just doesn't seem like this guy has a weak champion.
No, I agree.
You can't even ban it out. He played, he admittedly he only played 3 champions in this best of 5 with 2 gangplank games, 2 Nara games, and a Jax game. But he looked top tier on all of them.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you don't really need to play. I mean, like, why change something if it's working? Like in game
Mm.
one, we saw him play Jax, and why would he want, like, for example, if something's working for you, why switch it up? Like, if they're not going to ban it, pick it again because, I mean, just why not? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I think when you look at someone like Alfari, he just knows the kind of matchups that he wants to be playing, especially into a less experienced player. And so when he's taking the Gnar early pick, it believes that he just can't be counterpicked on it. The same with the gangplank. I think he's just confident enough on these champions that have some level of carry potential while blind picking them. And I think that's going to be a massive benefit for this team because it means you can start saving your mid pick, your AD carry pick, even your support pick for Core JJ for later picks to get a much more beneficial matchup.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think something that's really really hard to do as a top laner is be able to blind pick confidently, because arguably I would say top lane is the role which has the most kind of counter picks, especially since you're usually left on an island and you
Mm.
have no real support. Whereas, say for example, your bot lane, you're playing ADC, you have your support to back you up. Say if they
Yeah.
counter pick you, you have a support that can either counter pick them or really help you. And on the mid lane, your jungler is there to help you, most of the time. But it's hard to kind of blind pick as a top laner, and it all just comes down to, I think, experience really from Alfari.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who we've seen for so long in the LEC, and it's great to see him come out swinging in the LCS in his first few weeks here. The last thing I want to touch on about the Lock-In tournament is just the fact that I think Cloud9 could be the best team by the end of spring or the end of summer, and I'll explain why. We have a lot of criticisms right now of Cloud9. We say Fudge isn't necessarily performing very well. He looks like one of the weaker top laners in the LCS. We don't think that Perks is necessarily integrating as well with the team. He's not absolutely bodying people like we've seen against arguably a harder field in the LEC. Sven hasn't looked amazing. Blabber isn't doing all of the aggressive things that we know Blabber can be doing. And yet they still made it to the finals of the Lock-In tournament, beating TSM 100 Thieves and being one game away from beating Team Liquid. And I want to ask you, does that show hope for this Cloud9 lineup? Do you think they could be the best team, given more time to gel?
See, I am a bit on the fence about this, and I think, like you said, they haven't had loads of time to practice, but I feel like you can say the same about Team Liquid in a way, bringing in their new players as well. Even though those players they brought in for Team, I mean, it's really tough, because I think both Cloud9 and Team Liquid have the potential to be the best in North America.
My,
And go for it.
my thing is, like, if we look at the side of, if we compare that, like, our disappointment in the side of Cloud9 to what we think was a pretty good showing from every member of Team Liquid. You know, Alfari looks amazing already. Santorin coming into this working really well with a new top laner and a new mid laner, and the other parts of Team Liquid that were there before are looking just as good as before. We only have good things to say about Team Liquid, but we expect a little bit more of Cloud9. And if we expect a little bit more of them, surely we're going to see them be able to beat Team Liquid if they can do those things.
But then on the flip side, you could say Team Liquid haven't reached their full potential yet either.
Okay, but where's the step up from Team Liquid? Which Team Liquid member isn't playing amazingly?
Well, it's not just about individual play. For me, I feel like for example, Alfari and Santorin, two completely new players to this lineup, and the top jungle duo is really important in games, and I think same as a jungle mid duo, and I think as time progresses, they're going to become more comfortable together, and the fact that they were able to beat a team like Cloud9 now, I think is just it shows that they were able to work faster and more efficiently than a team like Cloud9. And I'm not saying that Cloud9 don't have the potential to be the best team, because I think that they do. I think these teams are right now really close, and I think it really comes down to which teams have the higher drive, and I don't think it's really like which player can transform a team. But like you said, we're not seeing the best out of Cloud9, and I don't believe we're not seeing the best out of Team Liquid either.
Well,
I just don't. It's hard to like. I don't know. It's hard to put it into words, but I feel like Team Liquid still haven't reached their full potential, even though they look so good.
yeah, I think it'd be very interesting to see, and I do think maybe the Cloud9 coaching staff have an easier time going forward, because it's very clear what Cloud9 have to work at to become the best team in North America, whereas for Team Liquid, defending it and figuring out how you can improve when you haven't fully been challenged yet is often a little bit harder.
I agree. I agree with
Like,
you.
Cloud9 know that you have to get Fudge's 1v1 better. You have to have Perks bodying people and moving around the map more. All of these little things need to be improved. Whereas for the side of Team Liquid, it's just generally play better and play more as a team. I can't really ask more of that from Team Liquid at the moment, at least, without being able to see it and conceptualize what the next step is for this team.
Yeah, and I'm sure the coaches have a better understanding than we do about what they can do to improve, obviously.
Yeah.
But like you said, to us, it looks like Team Liquid have things down really at the moment.
Mm.
Um, and if Cloud9 can work on their things, if there's no like egos involved in that team, then if they're willing to improve and get that coaching that they need, then 100% I would agree with you. But it's just until we see that, I think Team Liquid um will keep winning, to be honest, and I don't really see them losing against Cloud9 until like you say Cloud9 really unlocks their full potential. Then I think these teams will be really close, and then we can have the discussion again.
Yeah, definitely. And it'll be very interesting to see how that goes. Overall, final thoughts on the new LCS Lock-In. Good, bad? Do you want to see it again?
Oh yeah, I think I would love to see them do this again for the next season. I think it was a really good concept, and I think it worked really well. And it's great for not just the players but us to watch as well. I know that there was so much hype around it, and it also gives the teams more money as well. I
Yeah.
suppose. I mean, I know only the first place team actually took home prize
Mm.
money, which I was a bit surprised about. And maybe next year they can kind of split the prize pool, because I'm not too sure what their reasoning was on just having the first place take the prize money, because with other competitions, tournaments, we kind of see it split between like top three places.
Mm. Yeah, who knows? I know that I guess it was just to make it a little bit less pressurized for the teams in the middle of the pack, because if only one team can take home that prize, maybe it makes teams more likely to experiment in the early season. Who knows? I'll agree though. I thought the Lock-In tournament was a great success. The teams at the top definitely got a lot more games than they usually would. If you think about a team like Cloud9, who played the most games in the whole tournament, they played 17 games. That would
Yeah.
normally take us up to halfway through week 9, normally, to get
Yeah.
that many games, if we were doing the traditional best of ones. That's great. That's amazing. Give the teams more games. And yes, some teams only played 4 best of ones, but that's okay, because those are teams at the bottom of the league, and arguably going out earlier just gives them more time to play scrims, so they would be more like scrims to a higher level coming into the first week.
Yeah, I agree, and I think also for teams that manage to make it, it gives them so much more practice as well, because they're
Mm.
playing in a really competitive environment, especially in that finals where it's kind of an all for nothing. When you see these two teams come together, I think it's just great practice for everyone. I think no one really has any real complaints about this tournament.
No, definitely not. Thank God for some best of threes and some best of fives early on in North America, and hopefully this will lead to leveling up the league as a whole. But let's turn our attention to the spring split. Week 1. You know what? I'm just going to say the games don't look that interesting to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we can kind of probably make our predictions and feel really confident
Very,
about them about week one.
I mean, especially the first day, it looks like it's going to be a lot of stomps. So you'd expect, TSM, Team Liquid, Evil Geniuses. Oh no, sorry. We expect TSM, Team Liquid, Cloud9 to all stomp their games against lower down opponents. The only one that's really interesting to me on that first day is the Evil Geniuses 100 Thieves. As we've seen both of these teams perform top middle of the pack, in the lock-in.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's going to probably be one of the best games of this week,
Mm.
for me at least. And it's going to be exciting to watch these two teams who performed really well in the lock-in tournament go head to head. And who do you think is going to come out on top of that one?
I think it's going to be 100 Thieves. If we just look at how they fared in the best of threes, which is, a bigger sample size, we saw 100 Thieves have a really close best of three against Cloud9, whereas Evil Geniuses, yes, they managed to take their quarterfinals, but they got absolutely rolled by Team Liquid. And I just think I have a little bit more faith in the established core coming over from Golden Guardians to this 100 Thieves lineup.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with you there. Even though we've seen great things out of EG, I feel they're just not quite up to par as 100 Thieves because I mean, if you simply just look at the 1v1s in the lanes, it's going to be really tough for EG. Um, but still, I think it might be closer than we might imagine, and I feel like EG maybe playing from the back foot might be a little bit more hesitant, and it could either work in their favour
Mm.
or against them. We'll just have to see it on game day. But that is definitely the game which is going to be a highlight of this week.
Yeah, definitely. I think this game, if EG gets a really good draft, I could definitely see them taking it. I just think that, if you look at some lane matchups, we just expect 100 Thieves to come out slightly ahead, and I think that will be enough in what's definitely been the closest game of day one. I think the best game of the whole weekend, though, could be the Cloud9 TSM matchup from the lock-in tournament quarterfinals. These teams went 2-1 in the quarterfinals match, with Cloud9 managing to take the series somewhat closely against TSM. In a best of one, do you think it will be quite close, or do you think we're going to see a stomp from one of these teams?
Oh, I think it's so hard to really call best of ones right now because we haven't seen an awful lot of best of ones really yet, and best of ones are really just a coin flip unless you have like a really dominant team who's playing really well on the day. So for me, I feel like it's gonna be fairly close, and I feel like because these teams had a really close series, I feel like it's gonna come down to whoever is best on the day. But I would honestly favour Cloud9 in this just because we saw them go on to do really well in the tournament and
Mm.
give Team Liquid a run for their money. And for me, I feel like they are just a slight peg above TSM at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult because we saw Perks and some other members of Cloud9 really start to step up their play throughout the lock-in tournament, up to the finals where they look like one of, if not the best team in North America. Whereas TSM, we just didn't see them last week because of that loss in the quarterfinals. So it's much harder for me, at least, to gauge how TSM will be coming in, having had an extra week of solid scrims, not having to take some days off to play in the lock-in tournament. Then I've had those couple of extra days of scrims. Is that enough?
I mean,
I don't know. I think it'll be really draft dependent, though. I think whichever one of these teams can get the power picks that we're seeing in the current meta will take the game.
yeah, you're probably right on that assumption. I think it really does come down to draft between these two teams, and this is kind of like an age-old battle, really, Cloud9 versus TSM, and we've seen it go back and forth throughout the years, and we've never really seen like a definitive win, and especially between these two teams, there's going to be. I mean, it's a high stakes game realistically. Even
Mm.
though it is only week one, it's kind of setting the precedent for the season.
Yeah.
And I think both teams are gonna really want to win this.
Mm.
Um, but I
And
do
they
just
they've
slightly
also
favour Cloud9.
and they've also both come in with really big bucks signing in the form of Perks and Sword Art. And you could almost use this as a, well, who spent their money the most wisely?
Yeah, no, and and for me, I feel like just from looking at Sword Art's performance, from the LCS Lock-In, I would have to go again with Cloud9 spending their pennies
But
more wisely.
let me ask you this: do you think that Sword Art's performance in the lock-in tournaments, because he isn't worth the amount of money he's being paid, or do you think that maybe he isn't working out with Lost in that bot lane?
I mean, you're right completely. I don't think that TSM have made a bad signing in the slightest,
Mm.
because we know Sword Art is an amazing player, world class support.
Literally a world finalist just
Yeah,
last
exactly.
year. You have to believe that that's good money well spent.
Without a doubt, I agree. But it does come down to that pairing in the bot lane, and if Lost isn't playing well, it's kind of really hard for Sword Art to step up, and
Mm.
it's just going to be important for him to play a really engage heavy support, someone who can kind of put the ADC on their back and say, look, we're going in now. All you have to do is just press right click on them, okay, and they're
Yeah.
going to die, and you're going to get fed and be able to carry us. And that's what you need, and you need Sword Art to be on those roams, etc., because we know he's one of the best roaming supports in the world as well, and he plays his best when he's roaming, especially. I feel like, just from watching him out Worlds, um, and I feel like if he does all of those things, then TSM, like, I just can't call the game. I'm not gonna lie, I cannot call it whatsoever.
It definitely will be really close. And as a final point for the LCS, I do think that the TSM Sword Art pickup can be really good. We've seen how well picking up a world class support player can work if you can keep them in the organisation. When you look at Core JJ on Team Liquid, Core JJ came off. Yes, he won the World Championships and not just finished second, but both of these players, when they were in their home regions, were absolutely phenomenal. And I think if TSM can keep Sora around, keep him on the team, make him a part of the North American ecosystem, and specifically for TSM's ecosystem, we could see him have the same impact and revitalization that we've seen Cool JJ have in Team Liquid.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, and I feel like, even if we throw back to when Core JJ joined Team Liquid, obviously he's been there for quite a while now. It didn't work out immediately for them
Mm.
either. He didn't come in and instantly transform the team. It took some time for him to come accustomed, and then when him and Tactical kind of found their rhythm and their groove, they became
Yeah.
one of, if not the best teams. So we could 100% see the same thing happen
Mm.
with TSM, as well as those other players coming into their groove and rhythm as well, like PoE, brand new player. I mean, TSM have like an almost completely new lineup, so
Yeah.
um, it's
I
it's
mean,
obviously going to take some time.
it is five players who have never played with each other. And so even if they lose to Cloud9 in this first week, I don't think it's alarm bells quite yet. I think this team is going to take some time to really gel, because when you compare them to the other three teams in the top four, all of them kept three or four members of the previous lineup. TSM have none of that, and a brand new coach with their first time in the head coach role. So I think of all the teams with a lot of potential to win the LCS, I think TSM, is the most uncut gem of them all.
Yeah, I agree, and I think just like looking at what kind of happened in the off season for TSM, they were probably the team who had like the most unfortunate circumstances. Not really unfortunate, but obviously with Double Lift stepping down, as well as Bjergsen moving to coaching, they lost two of the most integral parts of their team just then. And then they had to kind of work around that, and they've done the best that they could out of a bad situation, and we'll just only see this team get better. I feel like the lock-in tournament wasn't really a full showing of their potential.
Mm, definitely. I think we've got room to grow, but at the moment, C9 arguably favoured in that matchup. I think that's all the time that we've got to talk about the LCS. Right, let's keep on going and talk about the LEC. We just saw week two out of 9 weeks wrap up, and we're definitely seeing some strong teams emerge in the LEC. The only team still undefeated is Rogue. What do you think of this team?
They look unstoppable right now. I feel like they look so good, and everyone on their team is playing so well. I feel like everyone's starting to come out of their shell a little bit more, and we're seeing them go for these more aggressive picks, etc. And players who we wouldn't have really thought of as like, I mean, all these players have amazing potential. And obviously last season it was all about Larson 1v9, but it's not really that anymore. It feels like everyone is kind of playing really well, and they're playing great as a team, and right now they just look so unstoppable. Although, like, their games have been a bit longer than the
Mm.
average kind of game, for the LEC, it feels like they that's kind of their style almost. Like they're taking the game a bit slower. They're controlling the game in their hands. They're not letting the opponents really get into the game, and they're able to play these longer games where they're sure of when they can end them. And again, like they're really good at closing out games when they need to. When they have the opportunity to close out games, they do. It's not like they're delaying games and they can't really close it out. They just wait for the perfect opportunity to close out games, and we've seen them do that. Like, and that's why they're unbeaten.
Yeah, I do think that, you comment on the fact that this team is a little bit slower than some of the LEC teams, and like you, that doesn't worry me at all. We've seen them play fast, we've seen them play aggressive, but they don't make mistakes, really. They don't have any of these bad points where they slightly give their opponent back in, away back into the game. That's not why the game's going wrong. The game's going wrong because they play a good standard version of League of Legends. They play aggressive in the early game to get a lead, and then they just play in a way not to give up that lead. And it's working really well.
Yeah, I agree, and I feel like yeah, like you said, it doesn't worry me in the slightest that they're kind of having these longer games, because they're still working on things, and they've still got time to kind of improve. And I think when you have these longer games, it's relatively down to like the shot calling of knowing when to finish out these games. And it looks like, I mean, to me, Rogue look like they know what they're doing at all stages in the game, and it doesn't feel like to me that they're not really taking the opportunity to close out games. It feels like they're waiting for the perfect opportunity, and they're doing it so well, and that's why they're having such great success.
Definitely. And man, the standout performers on this team are insane. Both the solo laners, Larson and Odoamne, are being mental. I've got some stats for you. Odoamne is only having his champion picked after the opponent's champion, which we would generally consider to be a counter pick, in 20% of the games. Yet at 10 minutes, he is up 11.4 CS on average. Larson, 40% counter pick rate with a 12.8 CSD at 10.
Jesus
It's insane.
Christ.
Both of them are up. Their XD differential at 10 is 200, and their gold differential is 300.
Wow.
These guys are bodying their lanes, and that's where this great consistency is coming from. And then you look and you see that you see that Hansama also has a gold difference of positive 300, while only having a 4 CS D at 10, showing that they're getting more solo kills. This team is nuts.
Yeah, I agree, and like you just mentioned some of those stats, that is absolutely ridiculous to me. That he has especially Larson has, what was it, a 40% counter pick rate,
Mm-hmm.
and he's still able to get such a huge CS lead. Like, that should just not be happening, and
Yeah.
and Larson is able to pull it off, and he to me is looking like, honestly, one of the best in mid laners in the LEC at the moment.
He
And
looks
I
like the
would
best
say,
player in the league.
yeah, I would say him
It's
over
it,
Caps right now,
yeah.
100%.
Both him and Odoamne look like the best players in their roles respectively, and they're not playing crazy champions. Yes, we've seen Odoamne pick up the Renekton a couple of times. He's had a Kennen game into an Ivern, which is something that we would expect him to have a slight lead. But he's also getting counterpicked the Volibear into the Renekton, for instance. And Larson, is just picking these champions, which we know he's great on. He's played a lot of the Azir. they're just doing amazingly. It's
Yeah,
that simple. They're just outskilling their opponents, regardless of what they're on at the moment.
yeah, and it's so impressive to see, and these players coming together, and just they look so unstoppable. And like you said, even though we've got these amazing stats of all these things, I think we can't really forget the rest of the team as well. I think Trimby is playing
Mm.
exceptionally well as well,
Well,
in the support role.
that was going to be my next point, is that when you have these really strong solo laners, it's so easy for Inspired to say, Larson, Odoamne, you guys have got this. You're on, champions that we know you're going to win on. I'm going to go and help the bot lane. And that's what we've seen Inspired do again and again and again. Inspired and Trimby have 60% first bloods in their game so far.
Mm, which is absolutely
It's
massive.
insane.
And
In 3 of the 5 games they've played, those two players together have got first blood. And these are two players who haven't played together before.
no, and I think it's really impressive to see the fact that they're working so well together already. And I think this should really be a wake up call for the rest of the league, to kind of snap into like they need to. I mean, for me, if I was looking at these stats as someone else, like G2 for example, or Mad Lions, or these other teams who you would predict to do really well,
Mhm.
for me it would be terrifying, and I would be really scared, especially when you have, like you said, a brand new bot lane. Duo partnership, obviously not a brand new bot lane because Han Summer's still there, but
Yeah.
Trimby coming in, you have the new partnership, and these guys already working so well
I
together.
mean, they're already bot gapping
Yeah, hugely.
as two players who haven't played together. That's the craziest thing for this rogue lineup. And I genuinely think if some of the other teams don't start stepping up, we are going to see Rogue just run away with the spring split regular season.
And honestly, we saw them do the same thing last summer. Like,
Yeah,
they had a great split, and unfortunately, when it came to playoffs, they couldn't really perform in those best of threes. But I honestly have more faith in this rogue lineup than I
mm.
did in the last years, because we have some exceptional players, and everyone looks to be
and
playing at their peak right now.
and they've got rid of their weakest point. When you look at these teams going to international competition, it's not, how good is your best player necessarily, it's how weak is your worst player. And Finn really struggled at last year's Worlds. Replacing him with Odo Amne means that this team doesn't really have a weak point, which I think will mean that when it comes to the best of threes and best of fives, they're going to do even better. So I have no worries about this team.
No, I have zero worries, and like you mentioned, they don't have a weak point in this team at all, and that's something that's again going to be really scary for other teams, because other teams can't really capitalize on, say, a weak side. Like, lots of teams like to kind of see, okay, that weak side, top side, okay, we're going to put all our resources into that top lane so
Mm.
we can snowball it. But this team just doesn't really have a weak side, and that's super impressive and really important, I think, for a team which is looking for one of those top three spots.
Yeah, 100%. Well, going from a team that we have no worries about to a team that I want to ask you, do you worry about G2 this week, having lost to Schalke?
I'm not sure if I really am worried about them. I think, again, this is just gonna be a real, like, wake up call again for them, because I feel like G2 just got a bit too complacent in this game. They
Mm.
kind of, I think they may have came into this game. Obviously, they came into this off having a great week one, and a great first game in week two,
Yeah.
and then they must have been feeling on top of the world, like
Mm.
unstoppable. They were, for me, it felt like they were just overextending a bit too much, playing a bit too cocky,
Yeah.
etc. And it just felt like they had too much, not enough maybe faith in Schalke to
Mm.
capitalize on their mistakes, which
It,
which granted to Schalke they did really well.
yeah, it definitely felt like maybe G2 came into this game a little bit overconfident, simply because, you know, if you take the kind of draft that G2 had, that tells to me that you're expecting to stomp the game. And also, they gave away so many strong picks to the side of Schalke, and Schalke just used those, and they played really well. They had great objective control throughout the whole thing, and that was a lot down to Gilius. And you have to shout out Broken Blade, playing an insane game, solo killing Wonder in the top lane, and then winning a 1v2 on the Aatrox and having some massive performance in these team fights. It just seemed like there was a little bit of not disrespect, but being unprepared for just how much better this Schalke team can play with more practice.
Yeah, and I would even go as far to say that there may have been some disrespect from the side of G2 because to me, just from watching the game, and I didn't catch the game live, so I'm not 100% sure, but I just watched the highlights, and all of G2's deaths really seemed like they had like we talked about, they were just overextending. They looked like they were way too. I don't really know how to put it other than they looked cocky in this game,
Yeah,
and
well, they were chasing, much further than they should have, going in when they were outnumbered because they probably felt like they could outplay, all of these kind of things. These are things that we've expected from G2 in the past regular seasons. It's just interesting to see that this is happening again with the roster change of bringing in arguably a more level-headed AD carry and Reckless.
Yeah, I would agree, and I don't really think that this game was necessarily on Reckless at all.
Mm.
I feel like
I
wasn't
mean,
really.
no, his support just kind of ran it down.
Yeah, and that's
let's,
really.
be, let's be honest.
It's unfortunate.
Mickey had over half of the team's deaths.
Yeah, no, and it's sad to see because Mickey X is someone we've praised so much, and we know he is a great support.
Yeah, let's just hope he doesn't go the way of Hilly-san going too far in the run it down camp. Do you know what? Talking about teams that run it down, specifically players that run it down, we saw Fnatic have a pretty convincing game against Vitality. However, they had a pretty convincing loss once they were up against the Mad Lions, who we've actually seen struggling so far. And this admittedly was a slightly slower game, 35 minutes, but
slow game. Did you watch this game?
It's 35 minutes, so it's slower compared to some of the stomps that we've seen from some of the better teams in the league. But
this game was a bloodbath.
It's a bloodbath, right? But Fnatic don't look good.
No, they look terrible. I have to agree. I just my views on this game, because I watched it all the way, and about halfway through the game I was like, okay, Fnatic, you're up, right? You have dragon control, you have map control, you're up on the kills, you have a gold lead, you're up in towers, you're up in drakes. Do not throw.
They were up in everything by about 20 minutes into the game, coming back from what was a decent early game from the Mad Lions.
Yeah, and I couldn't watch after about 30 minutes into this game. It was like at about like the 25 minute mark when Fnatic literally just started running it down, and it was so sad to watch because all they had to do was like play for Soul and maybe play for Baron, get a team fight, end the game, and that's it. But no, they kept forcing team fights for no reason. And it was just so weird, and I just couldn't really understand why they were doing it, and they were getting caught out so much.
Do you know what? I just think that Fnatic, this team, they have this way of playing, and it's really good that Nisqy and Upset are being included in the way of playing. I was really worried that these two wouldn't fit in, but they're fitting in perfectly in the run it down squad.
Yeah, I agree.
Have you ever seen Upset do so many dumb things in a game?
No, and I think it's really just a Fnatic curse, to be honest.
Yeah, I've never seen Upset get so close to a Wukong, who has ult up, and you're like 30 minutes into the game, and he's like, yeah, it'll be fine, and he gets knocked up and dies, and the Wukong gets like a triple kill or whatever it was, like.
And the thing is, we saw Upset play like really well in the start of this game. I thought he was honestly one of the best the highlights of this team in the early game and the
Yeah.
mid game, and he was able to kite extremely well and win team fights for his team as well. There was a moment when he literally got the five members of Mad Lions to
Mm.
chase him, and everyone was focusing on him, and he just goes invisible, and then the whole of Mad Lions die, and I'm pretty sure Fnatic aced. But again, we didn't really see Fnatic really capitalize on these team fights that they won either, and it kind of just looked like they got these team fights that they won in mid game and early-ish game, and they didn't really know what to do with it. They were like, all right, guys, let's go back to our lanes and farm some more. It wasn't like, all right, let's push this lane, let's take two turrets, or it wasn't really, all right, let's get Herald now, and then we can set up for a dragon fight because we're ahead. We can take these fights. It was just like, all right, let's try and push our lanes, play solo lanes. It just looked like they were really uncoordinated and all over the place.
Yeah, not good from Fnatic. It's
Not
the
at all.
TLDR.
Mhm.
If you're a Fnatic fan, don't go back and watch the game
I wouldn't.
because it hurts, man. And
It
this
was
is
a
a
really sad
team
game to
that
watch.
lots of people, including you, expected to be one of the best teams in this league, but they're currently down joint fifth with XL.
Mm,
Are you
yeah.
worried yet?
Yes.
What's the most
Simply.
worrying thing? Because we're going to have to wrap up this section and just go on and talk about the
Yeah.
LEC for 5 minutes. But what's the most worrying thing for Fnatic right now?
It's. I think it's just their coordination. Like I said, I feel like it's kind of their team plays and the fact that they int as well. That's
Yeah,
pretty much it. If they cut out the inting and I get it's a meme like Fnatic int haha funny, but it is a real thing that they need to stop doing.
yeah,
You can joke about it as much as you like, but at the end of the day, you're not going to win games if you're dying for no reason. Um,
yeah. I just feel like as soon as this team gets to the best of fives, they're going to run it down at least one of those games. And
mm,
if I say, yeah, this team's pretty good, but they are going to, have one guaranteed loss in every best of five. How do you pick that team against a G2 or a Rogue?
no, you can't, and I don't think there is any argument, and I don't think anyone is saying that Fnatic
Hmm.
is better than those teams
Or
at all,
or
especially after these weeks.
or a Mad Lions or a Schalke then, for that matter. At this point,
No, and I think honestly, I still have some faith for this team because when I mean, and we've seen this before, Fnatic don't always start out
mm,
splits greatest, and especially it's going to hurt this split for them, obviously losing Reckless. But when they get into their groove, I just hope that they can put the stupid silly mistakes aside and play better as a team, and I still have faith that this team can bounce back.
let's hope they can. If we look ahead towards week 3 of the LEC, the two games that I want to get your quick predictions for are Schalke Rogue on Friday. Prediction?
Uh, I mean, although this is just a best of one, and best of ones can go either way, I feel like Rogue right now look like the stronger team. Although we saw Schalke obviously beat
Mm,
G2, I would right now favor G2 over. I would favor Rogue over G2 anyway. So
yeah, same.
I would favor Rogue over Schalke in this match.
Yeah, I just think that Rogue aren't going to make the mistakes that we saw G2 allow Schalke to play really well and win the game. I just think that Rogue, player for player, are better. They won't make the mistakes, and so they
Mm.
won't give, they won't drop down to the level where Schalke's player level is good enough to beat them, which is essentially what G2 did.
Yeah, I agree, and I think just one more thing. I'm sorry if I'm going on. It's like we've seen Rogue, like you said, G2 making these mistakes, playing cocker. We talked about that. Even though Rogue have been playing exceptionally well, and they're maybe not egos, but they've got to be feeling confident, right?
Mm.
They're not making these little silly cocky mistakes that we saw G2 make.
Yeah, and it gives me faith for them to go undefeated. Like genuinely,
Mm,
at least up until they played G2 in week 4. The last game that I want to speak about quickly is El Clasico, Sunday evening, the last game of the day. We have G2 Fnatic.
oh gosh.
I'm pretty sure I know who we're going to predict, but how one-sided will it be?
I think it's going to be a huge stomp in favor of G2, just because like in every single role G2 win, like especially the mid gap for me is going to be huge, and this is something that Fnatic faced last year even
Mhm.
when coming up against G2. When Nemesis was playing for Fnatic, we saw Cap stomp that mid lane and was able to carry games, and I think that's going to happen again. And they also have just a stronger team in general this year, so I feel like and they don't have the reckless factor, for example. So
Yeah,
and G2 now have the reckless factor, so um,
exactly.
I feel like
How
it's
how quick the game? How many minutes? Final point.
Um, if G2 don't fuck up anything, and I feel like even if they do fuck things up, they're gonna win the game regardless. I Because Fnatic make more fuck ups than G2. I would say probably like 25 to 30 minutes. I think it's gonna be a stomp.
I think it's going to be 23 minutes. I think we're going to see an absolutely one-sided game. I think G2 are going to annihilate Fnatic and really kind of embarrass the team and show a lot of the Fnatic fans that this isn't the year for Fnatic. They're definitely going to need to take a year or two to start rebuilding this team. But let's turn our attention now and close out this episode by spending 3 or 4 minutes just talking about the LCK. How many of these games did you manage to catch, Ollie?
Unfortunately, Josh, my sleeping schedule has not been the best this week. So I managed to mostly catch the ones after, mostly like the later games, which start at like 11.
Mhm.
So I've been able to catch those. So granted, not a lot, but I think I've watched quite a few of the highlights as well. Um, and the highlights for LCK are always great as well. And
Yeah.
watching best of threes is always fun.
Yeah, definitely. My standout game that we want to talk about this week is the Damwon Gaming versus Gen G. I thought
Mm.
the first game was an atrocious steal of a game from Gen G. The early game comp was brilliantly played, but it wasn't good enough. And we saw Damwon Gaming come back in the style that we know that they can. But then Damwon threw a game,
Yeah.
which we never see.
No, I agree, and I think it was kind of like a bit of a kick in the teeth for Damwon because
Mm.
they Genji really stole this game away, and it was a huge throw from Damwon. But you know they bounced back after losing the first game,
Mhm.
and came back to like reverse sweep
Yeah,
in this best of three, and I think Damwon really showed why they were the best team.
yeah, and it was a very convincing series. If you were to just take games 2 and game 3, it would have been like a 50-minute game time absolute stomp with, you know, all of the members winning. And I thought that was really apparent in that top side. We see Khan and Canyon working much better together the further on
Mm.
we get into the LCK. And Showmaker just beat Chovy, which is something that you can't underestimate how unusual that is because Chovy is a monster.
Yeah, and obviously both these players have been in contention for the best mid laner in the world.
Mm.
And when you see someone win that outright in the mid lane, it's kind of a bit surprising, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and we're seeing some weird things happening. Not weird, but lots of changes happening with T1. They're definitely struggling at the
Oh my God.
moment, being seventh place, having a 3-4 best of 3 score. We're seeing Teddy coming back in. We're seeing Cuz being stopped out. We're seeing Closer and Faker, sharing time, but for almost no reason. What's going on with this team?
For me, it feels like this team is just a bit all over the place at the moment. They can't figure out a lineup which works best for them. And honestly, I can't understand why they've brought Teddy back into this lineup. For me
Mm,
personally, I thought Gumayusi played so well in the games which we saw him, and in this week T1 they just got bot gapped so big,
yeah.
and I just think bring Gumayusi back because he played so well.
I mean, yeah, Gumiushi was absolutely amazing. One other thing that was very interesting from the side of T1, did you catch their game this morning?
I didn't. No, I did not.
So we saw their young all-star talent coming in Zeus. He is 17 and 4 days old. This is genuinely the first game that he is old enough to play in the LCK. And he came in and he had a mediocre best of three against, I don't even know the name of the team, Nongshim Red Force, sorry, who T1 are tied with at the moment. This guy, I believe, was probably what they hoped to be their saviour, and it doesn't look like he is necessarily quite yet ready to carry T1 up to the higher ranks in the LCK. So I just need this team to figure out what the best lineup is, and then start playing with that lineup and show me at least that is the best lineup.
Yeah, and although I didn't watch the game, obviously, for someone so young, it can be really tough to, like, especially, I mean, he's 17 for God's sake, and coming in playing for a team like T1, which has extremely high standards, has got to be tough. But like you said, they need to really figure out a lineup to stick with and play the split with. Otherwise, they are going to keep dropping these games.
Yeah. Definitely. Looking forward to week 4, the games that I think are going to be the most interesting are actually around this DRX lineup. We've seen this team perform surprisingly well so far, currently having a record of 5-2. They have some tough games this week. They've already beat Gen G this week, but they still have to go up against Damwon Gaming in the final game of the week. And I think that would be really interesting because if DRX beat Damwon, they are going to tie them for first place. And that really would be surprising, considering they only have one player from last year, and that was arguably the weakest player on the team.
Yeah, I agree, and I think, like you mentioned, I think DRX have surprisingly been playing really well, and I honestly have a faith in them.
Yeah, I think it'll be a very interesting and surprisingly close best of 3, but I think that's all we've got time for today, unless you've got anything else to add about any of the regions.
I don't think so. I think I'm just again excited for the beginning of the LCS regular split. To be honest, that's the thing I'm most excited for.
Definitely, 100%. Any shout outs or anything you want to promote as we close out the episode?
I don't think so. How about you?
I've been streaming a little bit of Hearthstone over on Twitch. That's at Solids Gaming, SOLIDSGAMING. Link will be in the show notes. But apart from that, have a great week. Watch lots of League of Legends, and we will speak to you all next time on Weighing In.